Just so we're clear, this is Sadio Mane and this is Rose Lavelle. Good thing they put that there, otherwise I would have had no idea. Now, I've shared a number of opinions on New Balance football boots over the years, some good, some bad, and that's not just because I constantly change my mind, it's because some of the boots they've put out have been surprisingly good and some have been more on the questionable side, let's say. But I think their current lineup that they have on offer is as good as it has ever been, and I hate to use the word underrated because I feel like that's a very overused term in 2020 when it comes to describing football boots, but I definitely think that one out of their two models is way better than a lot of people give it credit for. And I have both of those boots for you today, one of which is in this fancy presentation case that New Balance sent me. It has this cool sleeve here on the front with Mane and Lavelle Rose on the one side, and then of course the two boots on the other side, a big New Balance logo in orange right there on the side. If I pull this sleeve off gracefully, that was a much better idea. You can see inside this very large box is the boots with some foam holding it in. There's nothing else in there. Nonetheless, this is the New Balance Furon V6 Pro in the new Ignite Hype Pack colorway, which retails for $210. This, of course, being New Balance's speed boot. And then inside this box right here, we have their laceless option, which is the New Balance Tekela V3 Pro, which also bears a retail price of $200. And of course, features a laceless knitted upper. This not a speed boot, but instead branded as a control boot. And despite both of these boots having knitted uppers, the way that they're constructed in general is extremely different, which leads to very different football boot experiences when it comes to fit and overall feel, which is what I want to talk about in this video. I do think one is significantly better than the other. I'll talk about why that is in today's video, and basically bring some light, shed some light, ignite hype in the New Balance brand, because I think that what they have on offer here is worthy of at least a little bit of hype. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. If you want to learn more about them, including how they fit and feel on feet, please stick around, watch the entire review. And if you are interested in either of these two boots for yourself, there will be links down below in the description, as well as a little pop-up in the corner of the screen that'll take you to the review page on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick up either of these boots in either the regular or wide fit variations. Yes, they make wide fit versions of both of these below their normal $210 retail prices. Also, if you guys do end up enjoying this video and would like to see more reviews of football boots from outside of the big three brands, don't forget to support this one with a like. And if you are new here watching for the first time and don't want to miss out on weekly content on everything football boots, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So as usual, I'll be very straight up with you guys. Between these two boots, I think the Furon V6 Pro is a significantly better football boot, although they do feel very different. So there is a personal preference aspect in regards to choosing between these two, but I would venture to guess that most people, if they got the opportunity to try both, would probably end up preferring the Tekela. And the reason why that is this is an underrated football boot in general. Obviously, it falls into the speed category, which is extremely competitive. This competes against boots like the Nike Mercurial Vapor 13 Elite, the Puma Ultra 1.1, the Adidas X Ghosted Plus N.1, all obviously very good football boots. What this has going for it is, one, the price point, $210 at full retail, which isn't cheaper than the Puma Ultra 1.1, which I think makes this, at least more recently, a little bit of a tougher sell than it once was. But because these aren't the most popular, if you buy some of the older colorways, you can get them pretty deeply discounted. So for $100, $120, you can pick up a top-end Furon V6 Pro, and for that kind of money, you're gonna have a hard time finding something better. As for what I like about the Furon, I feel like the term sock boot gets thrown around a lot these days because there are so many options with knitted uppers. However, as time has gone on, I feel like less and less boots with knitted uppers actually provide a sock-like sensation in terms of fit and feel, and that's something that the Furon, I think, does exceptionally well, better than all of the boots that I just mentioned from Nike, Adidas, and Puma. So from a comfort perspective, at least when you're talking about the upper, this is extremely soft. It's very, very flexible, and it legitimately feels like a nicely padded pair of socks. With that said, they're definitely not overly thick. This is still going to provide a thinner touch on the ball, but there definitely is a noticeable amount of padding by way of this knitted upper, as well as some foam and some liners on the inside that, again, just give this a very soft, natural sensation on feet. The boot, of course, does also feature a one-piece construction, similar to a lot of other football boots these days, and it also has a nice deep lacing system, unlike previous generations of the Furon, which means that the overall fit and lockdown is pretty good. Responsiveness, especially in comparison to all of its competition, is maybe not quite as strong, mainly because they have left the upper so soft, so it's not as structurally sound as some of the other options out there. But again, for what you lose in overall responsiveness, you gain back in terms of overall comfort. So it's a little bit of a trade-off that they chose to make, and I guess it just depends ultimately on personal preference. The boot does also feature a standard low-cut design. I think the back comes up a little bit higher than it needs to, but it doesn't seem to get in the way. You have an internal plastic construction for the heel counter, and then the heel liner is this really soft synthetic suede material, plenty of padding, good lockdown, feels very nice in general. And then the insole, is fully removable. It features their Infinigrip liner, which just looks like regular mesh, but it has a little bit of a soft silicone texture to it. I really like this as a liner material. Grips your socks ever so slightly, and then it's just made from a very thin layer of what is, quite frankly, a very flimsy black foam material, but all in all, it gets the job done. As for the sole plate and stud pattern, which is the firm ground variation, as you can see listed on the boot for some reason, it is very Mercurial-esque. The sole plate, for the most part, is a pretty standard plastic. It has good flexibility through the forefoot. It's obviously stiffened through the midfoot and heel, so nothing I would say particularly extraordinary about this, especially in comparison to something like a Mercurial or the new X Ghosted series, which has a little bit more of that kind of springback effect. But if you prefer a more flexible sole plate, you're not going to have any problems with this. And then the stud pattern, I don't want to call it a Mercurial copy, but it's very Mercurial-ish in terms of having pretty much all bladed chevron studs that go in pretty much the same direction through the forefoot. You have the support stud going in the opposite direction, and then you have some bladed chevron studs in the heel as well. It's a huge improvement over previous generations of the Furon, and as you'd expect, based on it being so similar to the Mercurials, it's extremely aggressive in terms of the amount of bite that it provides. Definitely not a stud pattern that I would say is a great option for use on artificial grass, but on natural grass playing surfaces, this is pretty well as aggressive as it gets, and as close to a pair of Mercurials as you're going to get without actually buying Mercurials. As for the Tekela V3 Pro, obviously the main selling point here is going to be the fact that it is a laceless football boot, the first ever from the New Balance brand, but I'll be honest with you guys in saying that they're not really my cup of tea, and I think part of the reason for that is not that they're laceless, which is typically not my thing in the first place, but the fact that there's nothing about this boot that I think stands out as a particularly unique feature, which is kind of what I look for in a lot of football boots. And it's not that a boot needs to do something never been done before in order to be good, but the knitted upper that they've gone with on this boot, in comparison to the Furon, has a lot more plastic reinforcement on the outside, and the liner is a little bit different as well. It just ends up feeling stiffer and more rigid. They've gone with this interesting kinetic stitch kind of texturing, which is highlighted in bright orange on this particular colorway, which is just thicker stitching that ends up kind of just being hard spots on the upper. It's noticeable when you strike the ball, but in general, I just don't think it feels all that great, and certainly doesn't add to the overall experience all that much. I just would have preferred a softer upper in general, but the reason why it needs to be so structured is because of the laceless design that they've gone for, where of course filling in the central portion of the upper is a more stretchy, elasticated mesh that doesn't actually stretch as much as you would expect it to, which is good for the sake of lockdown. And then kind of similar to the Nemesis 19 Plus, you can see it highlighted in orange. There is a little bit more of that elasticated material in the form of a band that kind of goes across the top of the foot. Again, just to add that little bit of extra tension to hold your foot in place and push your heel into the back of the boot because there aren't any laces. The end result is lockdown and responsiveness that I would say is on par with most other laceless boots, But I really think the only reason why you buy this laceless boot over something from Adidas as an example is because it retails for $210 rather than $275. And I guess to be a little bit more specific with my criticism, if I'm comparing these laceless boots to all 4 of the current laceless options from the Adidas brand, I would probably pick these over the Nemesis 19 Plus, mainly because I'm just not a big fan of how those fit and feel. But if I'm comparing these to the Copa 20 Plus, the Predator 20 Plus, or the X Ghosted Plus, I'm picking all of those boots, even with the higher price tag, over the Tekela V3 Pro. And the main reason for that is I think all 3 of those boots that I just mentioned have something unique about them that doesn't feel like any other football boot, where for me, the Tekela V3 Pro kind of reminds me, if I had to compare it to anything, to like the Adidas Ace 17 Plus, which I know a lot of people really liked. I wasn't a big fan of those. This to me is just a laceless boot with a knitted upper that feels a little bit too stiff. Aside from the collar, which is just some extra knitted material, the overall internal construction, insole included, is pretty well the same as the Furon that I just showed you. And then the sole plate and stud pattern is, again, somewhat uninspired. It's a plastic material all the way through, stiffener bar through the middle, decent flexibility through the forefoot, pretty similar to the Furon in that regard, but the stud pattern is as standard as it gets. And again, I think it compares very closely to something from the Adidas brand in terms of the number of studs as well as the shape of them. They're kind of like this square shape with a little bit of rounded edges. For the most part, it feels like a conical stud pattern, not overly aggressive in any way at all. And while not a bad stud pattern, again, it's just fairly ordinary. And then when it comes to weight, both of these boots are pretty lightweight, both in a size 9.5 US. We'll start with the Tekela. You can see that they weigh in at 7 ounces exactly, the equivalent of 199 grams. Change the scale back to ounces and we'll throw on the Furon, and you can see that they weigh in at a little bit less, 6.6 ounces, the equivalent of 187 grams. So from a weight perspective, obviously the speed boot offering is going to be a little bit lighter, and it's very competitive in comparison to all of the boots that I mentioned from a weight perspective. But in general, if you're after a lightweight feel from your football boots, whether you go Tekela or Furon, you're definitely gonna get that. On feet, there's a few things to note about these 2 boots. The first of which is the fact that I think this colorway looks absolutely fantastic. The combination of the royal blue and the orange just really pops, and I think this is easily the best colorway for both of these football boots thus far. As far as overall fit and feel is concerned, however, they do feel distinctly different from each other, where, like I mentioned, the Furon upper is just softer, it's more flexible. It really does feel like a pair of socks wrapping your feet where you're already wearing socks, but you get the idea. They're very, very comfortable and just feel very natural out of the box. Pretty much no break-in time required, where the Tekela, with its laceless design, it's more structured knitted upper. It just has a stiffer feel in general, and on the ball, the upper, it's similar in thickness, but it just feels a little bit harder. So I wouldn't say that it's a negative type of feel in comparison to the Furon, but it's certainly not as comfortable in my opinion, but that's very much a personal preference thing. As far as overall width is concerned, these are both the regular width variation, which I don't think either of these are particularly narrow at all. I think both of these will fit most people, but if you did have really, really wide feet, you do have the option of the wide fit variation for both of these boots. So definitely something to keep in mind, and something that is pretty unique to the New Balance brand at this point in time. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing both of these boots in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to order either of these for yourself, I would recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I think both of these boots are solid options depending on what you're looking for. Although I will admit, I think the Furon is a much better overall football boot in terms of fit, feel, and performance. It's certainly my preference out of the two. And in the speed boot category, it definitely holds its own against any of the main options from the big brands. I think that the release of the Puma Ultra 1.1 at $200, $10 less than this boot, makes it a little bit of a tougher choice at this point in time. But I think what this does have going for it in comparison to all of its competition is a very soft, slightly more padded, very sock-like sensation from the upper. If that's what you really like from a pair of football boots, that's exactly what you're getting from the Furon, and it arguably does that better than any of your other options. With the Tekela, like I mentioned, I don't really prefer it over most of the laceless options from Adidas right now, but it's a heck of a lot less expensive. And like I mentioned earlier as well, if you liked the A16 Plus or the A17 Plus in terms of overall feel, especially the upper, that's kind of along the lines of what the Tekela really reminds me of. So if you want something like that again, because those are no longer available, then I think you'd be pretty happy with these. And that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're interested in either of these two boots for yourself, links down below in the description. Those will take you to the review pages on my website, where you'll find buy it now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick these boots up below their normal $210 retail prices. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down below in the comment section, and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.